Little Big Planet, starring Sackboy. I'm telling you, the XXX version just writes itself. Hey everyone, Divvy here. Sorry, I'm starting off with a very dirty joke, but I got nothing else. In the wake of the upcoming release of the third installment in the franchise, I am deciding to review Little Big Planet 2. And the story for Little Big Planet... Wait, whoa. What? Yeah, that's right. That's actually one of the biggest, if not the biggest change in Little Big Planet 2 as opposed to the first Little Big Planet. And that is that it actually has a story with a narrative and characters and dialogue. Unlike the first game where it was simply just a series of worlds that each had their own little story built within it, but you simply just jumped from world to world. Here you're jumping from world to world, but there's a narrative that ties it all together. And that narrative is the story of the evil Negativitron that's threatening to simply destroy all of, I guess, the Little Big Planet. And it is up to Sackboy and his gang of misfit yet really wise companions to be able to forge a plan to be able to get rid of the Negativitron and save the world, or the Little Big World. So if you want to at least try to make your sequel better than the first one, you need to introduce something big, something way different than the first one. And I believe that to be the story that we get in Little Big Planet 2, as opposed to the first one, which practically didn't really have a story. It was, like I said, just you going from world to world, solving the things in each world, and then moving on. Whereas here, there is one entire narrative of the story that's tying it all together, introducing you these different characters, and of course with a story comes dialogue, and with dialogue comes voice work. This is the first time that you actually have characters talking to one another instead of making that gibberish type of noise. Even though we still have moments where those characters still do that within the gameplay. Like right when you're starting or even ending a mission, you have characters that still go but then we go to a cutscene and now they're speaking legitimate English. That was a little inconsistent. But speaking of which, you got cutscenes, and that's one of the biggest integrations into Little Big Planet 2, is that we didn't really have that many cutscenes or any cutscenes at all in the original Little Big Planet. So to have cutscenes that also contain some of that witty humor that we've come to love from the Little Big Planet franchise, it was nice to see those two things come together to bring us something new. There's a part of me, however, that does miss the quote-unquote silent humor of Little Big Planet, where, like I said, nobody really spoke English. It was all reliant on those text bubbles and you reading them as they go along. It was part of the humor, but still they retain that very subtle way of delivering humor instead of going for some slapstick, even though there are some moments of slapstick here and there because of the fact that you're introducing some of these characters, especially this really over-the-top character that I can't remember his name. His last name was Centrifuge, something Centrifuge, but you know, he's dressed all flashy, he's got the big glasses, and he talks like this, you know. And you know, some of these characters are somewhat caricatures, but sometimes the things that they say to one another are bound to get a laugh out of you. And keeping up with the quality that Media Molecule has provided us with these games, this game still looks great in terms of the design. You know, the way these characters are designed, especially the older man, I believe his name was Larry Da Vinci. It was pretty clever. You know, he's all made out of cardboard, and his glasses are made out of cardboard, and then you got this other queen, I can't remember her name. And like I said, that Centrifuge guy, despite being caricatures, in a way they're supposed to look like that, because this is a very cartoony look to Little Big Planet. It's how it was since the beginning. You know, everything is supposed to be everything's supposed to look like it was made out of arts and crafts. So it makes sense that these characters look like caricatures. And they were charming, not only in terms of their dialogue, but also how they looked. And the environments are, of course, also really beautiful to look at and to also interact with when you're going from level to level and seeing how each world has its own little personality. And to have all these tie up with the Negativitron and see this common thing going, it makes the entire world feel more connected than the original, because like I said, in the original you just jumped from world to world, so you just went to the water world, or I'm going into Super Mario at this point, but even though they're both platformers, you know, Little Big Planet was kind of inspired by Super Mario, we can kind of tell that, but in the original everything was kind of disconnected. That's not to say that that was a bad thing, but everything had its own little separate thing going on, its own little separate theme when you went from world to world. Whereas here, because you got the common denominator of the Negativitron, you have characters that are often talking about, oh, the Negativitron came this way, he went that way, or you should check this out, or whatever. And so it makes everything feel like one seamless Little Big Planet. Now, like I stated, the integration of a story brings along with it cutscenes that basically tell the story when you're not playing it. The only downside to these cutscenes is that because of the camera angles, they sometimes zoom in on these characters and zoom in on certain parts of the environment to be able to tell that story. And because of that, I never really noticed how somewhat dated some of these graphics started to look after a while, because I believe this game came out around 2008, maybe 2009, and from a distance, from, you know, when you're playing it, you have Sackboy here, and then you got the entire frame like this, and you just look at everything and everything looks great. But because the cutscenes rely on some of these shots that are a little bit more close up, the graphics start to show their age a little bit, and that's something that I'm a little worried about with the third installment coming up. In fact, there's actually a few things that I'm going to mention in this review that I'm a little worried that Little Big Planet 3 is going to suffer from, and I'll get to them in a second, but that's definitely one of them, is that Media Molecule has become so reliant on their gameplay and how charming they can be with the dialogue and the story that they didn't really bother to upgrade the graphics. And there were numerous times where the camera would just zoom in, and I'm like, oh, that texture could have looked a little better. Actually, I just remembered, Little Big Planet came out in 2008, Little Big Planet 2 came out in either 2010 or 2011. That makes things a little worse for the graphics. Now, with the movie, it is important to make either the story better or integrate a story in the first place, such as this case, or make it look better. But when it comes to a video game, you also need to put new things into the gameplay to make a sequel better than the original. And Little Big Planet 2 did that. But I do have one particular concern with the gameplay and the new things that they introduced in the gameplay. First of all, they introduced new little mechanics to make the puzzles a bit more fun and, I guess, so to speak, more fresh than the original. You got these different mechanics like this claw that you can use to... It's almost like Sackboy practically becomes Spider-Man. He's able to launch this claw and swing and then grab something else that's grabbable and swing from there, and then you got these gloves that allow you to pick up really heavy objects. And all of these different things that Sackboy gets to use this time weren't in the original, and they're very well integrated into the puzzles. I was having an awful lot of fun using these different types of mechanics and utilities in these puzzles that I almost forgot my little complaint with the gameplay that I'll get to in a second. And my complaint is that it's not very challenging when you introduce these new things, because I hardly really died in Little Big Planet 2. I remember certain moments, maybe 2 or 3 moments in the original, where I kept having to redo it over and over again because I needed to nail the jump just right. I honestly cannot remember doing that whatsoever in Little Big Planet 2, to where I needed to hit that sweet spot and time it right to jump off a certain platform and get to the next one, or solve a particular puzzle within an allotted time. I can't remember any of that happening in Little Big Planet 2. If anything, maybe just once, and I think it was in the candy level, where it's practically the Quinn's level and everything's made out of candy. I think that happened only once in that level, but other than that, it's not very challenging. On the bright side, some of the side minigames that you unlock as you progress through each world are actually rather fun. Some less than others, some are kind of routine. Like there's one where you're on a mouse and you need to go in this figure 8 or in this circular track, and games like that, or even worse, there's another one that literally has no point unless you play it with a second player. It's the only way that you can enjoy this game. So some of these games are sadly only fun if you have a second player to play with and to go up against. But then there's these others that even if you're by yourself, you'll have an awful lot of fun doing these things. And even if you fail, you're gonna have so much fun doing it, or have so much fun failing, that you're gonna want to try these minigames again to see how much better of a score you can get next time. And while I'm on the subject of playing with another friend, the multiplayer mechanics are practically the exact same thing. You can have another person drop into your game, whether it be online or locally, and play through the game together, whether it be the single player or these minigames by themselves. And trust me, the game actually becomes a little bit more fun if you play with a friend. In my personal opinion, it's way better if you play locally instead of online, because online, there might be a fault there in terms of communication, like, hey, I want you to go here so I can go do this, and he or she may not listen to you unless you got, you know, Bluetooth or whatever, so that might be a bit of a problem. But when you play locally, like I did with my friend, and we were just having an amazing time. Even when we were getting things wrong and we were just screwing up everything. There was one point where I was supposed to pick up like a block because I had those gloves that allow me to pick up really heavy things, and instead I ended up picking her up and throwing her against the switch, and it was like one of those sudden frenetic things that was happening all over the screen, and I remember laughing so hard. So if you can, please play with a friend by your side, and mainly through the single player campaign as opposed to the side quests, because you'll just have an amazing time playing this. And there's also some new content available in the content creator, and if you guys don't know, the content creator, which is carried on over from LittleBigPlanet, is this section where you can create your own levels. It can't be as intricate as the original levels that the developers have made for you, but it gives you the opportunity to really stretch your creative muscles and then post them online and have other players go through your level and see whether or not they can beat it. And of course, that's not the only thing that gets carried on over from LittleBigPlanet. One of the sweet little things is that actually your own Sackboy can also be brought over from the original LittleBigPlanet. You could start from scratch, but the narrator, who is also returning in this friend, I can't believe I forgot to mention the narrator, who also has some witty dialogue within himself. But if you like, you can take the Sackboy that you created in the original and bring him on or her over into this game and make the entire franchise, and I'm assuming it's going to be the same thing with LittleBigPlanet 3, a lot more seamless, and make it the cutesy version of Mass Effect. I don't know. Now, what I just said about the content creator pretty much sums up my overall feelings about LittleBigPlanet 2. You got some new content in the content creator, but overall it's almost practically the same exact thing, which is not particularly a bad thing. That's probably the best analogy that I can think of for LittleBigPlanet 2 for me personally. I feel like LittleBigPlanet 2 is a rather hefty expansion pack that is so big that it needed to almost become its own game, and therefore did become its own game and got released years later. The introduction of a new story is completely welcome, and some new things integrated not only into the gameplay but also into the content creator, and also some of the things that you can use to customize your own Sackboy are also welcome. But when you break it down, it's practically the exact same game. I mean, you're going from world to world, solving these puzzles that aren't really challenging because of the new things that you're given. It's almost like an expansion pack. You got some new things in there that could have been added to the original through like DLC. But that's not to discredit everything else that was good about this game, because I still enjoyed it. I still had an awful lot of fun, especially with some of the most fun aspects about LittleBigPlanet, whether it be through the gameplay or through some of the dialogues, through some of the humor, as well as some of the co-op things that I was able to do with my friend that just had me laughing. And despite thinking that this could have been an expansion to the original, and even though it kind of feels like it, I still enjoyed it. I am willing to give LittleBigPlanet 2 an 8 out of 10. However, like I stated earlier in my review, I am worried that that's practically what's going to come from LittleBigPlanet 3. That it's, despite their introduction of these 2 or 3 other types of sack boys, sack people, like the dog-looking one, or the very big one, or the one that kind of looks like a ghost. I can't remember what they're called and what they do, but despite introducing these 3 new characters, are we going to get the exact same game over again? Because that's kind of what LittleBigPlanet 2 is. Now, don't get me wrong, I enjoy having some more LittleBigPlanet to play, because I feel warm and fuzzy inside when I play this franchise. But aside from introducing these 3 new characters, I would really love for them to do something new. Since you integrated a story into LittleBigPlanet 2, it would be kind of nice that not only does 3 have also a story within it, along with a narrative and dialogue and all that, but also change that story up to instead of a brand new story, have that story somewhat connect to 2, and therefore making the experience all the more seamless. And please, it's 2014. If you're gonna have cutscenes, make sure those textures look good. Whoever's making the game, because I might be wrong about this, but I don't believe Media Molecule is doing this one because they were doing Tearaway. So that adds to my skepticism. So thank you guys for watching. Let me know what you guys thought of LittleBigPlanet 2 if you have played it, but if you have not, and you like my review and are convinced to buy it, be sure to use the link in the description below. It really helps me out a lot. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys later.